Welcome.
Thank you.
So you're not at Microsoft yet.
I do not have a number yet. I have put dibs on a number, but apparently Microsoft number 1 was taken.
All right, fair enough, fair enough.
Apparently that's a big deal over at Microsoft.
There's a Gates guy or something.
Yeah.
Probably has that. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, GitHub has been acquired by Microsoft. Well, not quite yet. Hasn't closed yet.
I don't know the language, but
it has not closed yet. But that's quite the story. We did not expect to see that. A lot of developers did not expect to see that. A lot of people at GitLab were very happy to see that. What's your take on that people were worried about you getting acquired by Microsoft?
There's a couple of different ways you probably think about it. You know, I grew up in I was born in the 70s, started programming in the 90s. Everyone knows what Microsoft's history was with then. My first operating system I bought was Windows 95, but the first operating system I installed for real was Slackware back in the day when you had those books with the floppy disks on the back. I think there's a hangover. You know, the thing I take away from this is that reputations are hard to change. And if Microsoft developed a reputation for a period of time that was one way, how long is it going to take for people to change it?
How long is it going to take?
Give us maybe a year to prove it.
All right, fair. That's fair. Do you think you can actually change that?
I think Satya has already been done a good job at that. I think that he's already, and the leadership over there have already shown a willingness to be open and collaborative with the community. They're the ones who started the conversation with us about acquisition, and the first thing that they said was, and of course we need you to remain open. You can't be closer to us than to our even competitors. You have to remain an open platform. So kind of stopped us from one negotiating point. I was like, great, take that away from us. I think they've already started the job. I think it's just on the next wave of leadership inside Microsoft, and I'm thankful to count myself in that, to prove it and to continue to earn the trust of developers.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's a good segue, I think, towards talking about the open ecosystem that has developed, and you guys are a big part of that, not just because you do a lot of open source development happens on your platform, but you're just a very open platform yourself as well. How did that come about?
Well, GitHub's 10 years old, and if you want to post hoc rationalize everything, we can always sound incredibly intelligent. But I also imagine that I've only been there for a year, but given that I've been around the space long enough, you know that there's a high degree of timing and luck involved in those things. And in GitHub's case, I think the kernel of the idea was so true that the developers gravitated to it. They really wanted it. And then there's a flywheel effect on one side, and don't mess it up over here on another side, and then just kind of watch what happens. But really what it was is, at the heart of it, GitHub was started by developers for developers, and when you listen to the development community and engage with the development community, they ask you for certain things. And the one tenet and principle that we thought about all the time inside of GitHub, and I know this because it's still 10 years old and I get this all the time, is this right for the mass of developers in the world? Not some sub-segment or some niche segment of developers, but would, generally speaking, developers like this?
Now, developers are a fickle bunch. They're not easy. They don't like to pay for stuff either, but they like to, they don't.
Is this when you ask me when developers going free?
No, not really, but if you want to talk to us about that, that's fine.
We'll wait a little bit on that.
All right, sounds good. No, but how do you market to developers? How do you get them to come to you? Because I'm sure there's some startups out here that do market to its developers. And
the principle, I think, for marketing to developers is don't market to developers, or at least don't make them feel that they're marketed to. Now, that's a fine line to walk, but I actually believe that you don't want to market to developers. You want to actually get them to market for you. And I think the best way to do that is to get people excited about what you're building so that they can't stop talking about it. Because developers want to tell you their tool preferences left and right. Just open up Twitter and you'll see this all day. And I know we're onto something when we don't have to do the marketing ourselves. And as the head of technology, which is product engineering and security at GitHub, my one principle is you'll never see a banner ad, you'll never see something on GitHub that looks to be an advertisement, you'll never feel marketed to, you'll never see Clippy. I'll just say that the joke's out there. No Clippies
No.
except for maybe April Fools come back on
Cortana?
April Fools. No, well, that's a little different maybe, but no, we have no plans for Cortana either at this point. But you don't want to market to developers, and developers don't want to be marketed to. They want to feel that they're respected. I'm a developer, I know what it means to feel that my opinion was valid and listened to. So the way I market to this is I have canaries in the community, and I want to go to them early about something that we're building, and I'll show it to them, and I'll say, hey, does this resonate with you? Does it get you excited? And if they say, can I tweet it right now? I know I'm onto something.
Mm-hmm. It's still hard to do.
It's work. That's a lot harder actually than spending money on digital marketing campaigns.
Right.
And it's more thoughtful, I find, and more engaging. But I think it's the longer view, the healthier long-term view on how to do that. There's a saying I give for leadership seminars, which is reputations last longer than roles, which basically obviously means that like do the job the right way, because if you get short-term outcome but long-term deficit in your career, you're kind of screwed. Well, it's even worse for a company. If you look at Microsoft's record from the 90s, and we're having a hangover here going into 2020.
Yes. And
I don't think that you can lose a developer's trust and gain it back easily, as evidenced by this.
Sure. Now, to get back to the open part of all of this, part of that, it seems, is to be open to partnerships with everybody, too. You just did a partnership with Google, which was kind of weird. There was a week after the Microsoft announcement. How does it all fit together, and what does it mean for the developers on your platform there?
I hope everyone read that as it was intended to, which is we are and will be the most open development platform out there. Google is just one of the many announcements that we're going to have the rest of this year that indicate open platform. We have been working with Microsoft, we have been working with Google, we have been working with Amazon as the majors, and then all the minors and incumbents out there as well, that we've been working with them all. And we will continue to do that. Now, there's an economic component for Microsoft with Azure that they want to see some success with. My job is to make sure that Azure is not the best product in the world. My job is to put back pressure on Azure at that point when it's in there. It's like, if you want to compete in an open platform, you have to be good. That's my view of that.
What can startups learn from this experience when it comes to openness?
The default open model, I feel, has started a long time ago, though is still catching up. Default open in either what you're building or from a customer engagement standpoint. I think it works really well, but it's also scary. It's kind of like if you're a one-person startup company, you want to go and talk to every VC in the Valley or in Canada possibly, and say, please sign this NDA. Everyone knows that that's a big joke. No VC is going to sign that NDA. If your idea is good enough, you're still going to have to scream it from the rooftops type of thing.
Anybody here make somebody sign an NDA? You're my people, thank you.
I kind of think it's the same thing with what you're working on and what you're doing, and defaulting to open is a great model for that. It's going to be hard for people to rip off your ideas, and as we saw anyway, once you release something, it's fair game anyway. Everything that GitHub has done has been ripped off. And I say ripped off, I shouldn't say that. It's been copied, it's a good idea, it's been adopted, it's now more standard than whatnot. So it doesn't matter if you wait for that. I think you just chart your own course, keep it going, I would prefer you do it in the open. I think it's a better model. I also think it builds trust to show and say, and then do. So.
Are there no negatives?
Again, I think it's harder. I think it's much harder because the opinions are louder and broader and become less nuanced the wider it goes. And in a day and age of social media and engagement, nuance has been lost, and it's difficult to have complex, sophisticated conversations. And they kind of degrade to the lowest common denominator in terms of like a feature set or color or other minor indicator. But that shouldn't distract you or detract from having those conversations, in my opinion.
What's the role of open source in all of this?
So
You're sighing.
I sigh for a lot of different reasons on this question. Open source won. It won. Open source won. It powers the modern internet. Every company effectively works or is built on open source for the most part, maybe except for Oracle, who seems to be doing the exact opposite, which the entire industry trend is at the moment. But why I sighed was because while open source won, it did the classic thing when you see it becoming a really good idea, is that the corporations started to come in. And I don't mind corporations coming in because they've actually engaged well on this front. And I think that they've helped open source, but it wasn't the utopia that anyone in the 90s thought it was going to become, and Richard Stallman is still railing against the open source system as it is today. I sigh because I think that we're still conflating philosophical, political, and financial, and in one big ball, and it's very difficult to pull apart. In my opinion, I like the open source model for software when you strip it all away and just say, here's the code, here's the learnings, here's how to build some sophisticated and interesting things, because it accelerates everything else in the world. All the other things to the side, I'll let someone who's smarter than me debate about the political leanings of this or the financial models and whatnot. I just want to see the code, and that's what I'm happy about.
That's enough for you, just the code?
At this point, yes.
Doesn't have to be a foundation, under the Linux Foundation or Apache?
I don't know how I'm supposed to answer that question. I respect the foundations. I think they've done a lot of good.
Okay.
I think they've held corporations, it's almost like labor union parties and things like that, to corporate interests. I think they've held the corporate interests at heel to a degree, which I very much appreciate. The Linux Foundation in particular, I think, is very good at this, particularly, and I think it was needed in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they've done a masterful job, in my opinion.
Got it. Do you think startups should be open sourcing everything?
My recommendation would be, if startups were to think about open source or not open source, is that most of what you do is likely to be uninteresting anyway. There's going to be some small segment of thing that you do is
Define uninteresting.
Well, I find that so many startups kind of say, I'm going to make up something in the moment, but I'm building an app or I'm building a CRM, and I'm going to keep all of this closed. I'm going to keep all of it. But that's not the value in the world. Another CRM application is not the value. It's the code in it. It's the value you provide to the customer. It's the experience you provide to the customer and the engagement. And most of those things will be copied again anyway. So if you want to open source it and you believe in open source, or there's some value to you, uniquely to you, I say go do it. Don't be scared off by doing that. But on the flip side, there's much of what we do I think that is very uninteresting, generally speaking, and a lot of times you default to close because you might be embarrassed by the code, or there's something else at play, and that's fine too. I have not open sourced a lot of my code because I am frankly embarrassed by it, or it's a weekend hack and you don't want someone to see it and form a reputation or an opinion about you, And at this point, when I'm the head of technology at GitHub, there's this thing about me I'm supposed to be, and if anyone saw my code, they'd be devastated. Now
I want to see that code.
No, you don't. My bash shell scripts are terrible. The SRE team at GitHub has laughed me out of many rooms. So,
do you still code at all?
I do, but it's a very different type of coding. Most of it is out there experimental at this point. I'm an old infrastructure engineer, and so what I do is I'm out there playing with all the latest stuff, trying to figure out where the utility is in this, but most likely 2 to 3 years out, and you're trying to make bets.
Sure.
Because you're trying to figure out what service meshes are going to win out. A couple of years ago was which of the containers, and then which of the orchestrators, and which is now proxies and service meshes. You're trying to figure out which one's going to be which.
Totally. Now we talked about the side of open sourcing. What about contributing to open source? Is that something startups should actually think about?
It could be a distraction. Contributing to open source could be a distraction if you make it part of the job as opposed to an augmentation of the job that's useful to you to run your business. Prime primitive number one you should have in your business is it's got to be good for your business. And if it is, do it, and if not, it's probably a distraction, particularly when you're smaller and trying to get off the ground and you're leaner and you've really got to kind of fight things. So two sides of that. One is you're probably going to be more of a leech in open source than you would be a contributor, but once you get big enough and you can contribute, flip it to contribute to it as much as possible. And I say there's only two real currencies obviously in the world. There's time and money. And if both of those are really constrained for you as a younger startup, one of those typically becomes much more of a luxury as you get bigger. Figure out which one of those is and give that back.
Now, you've got the time, you've got the money at this point, thanks to Microsoft.
Not quite yet, but
not quite yet. But that check will clear, I'm pretty sure. What's next for GitHub now under Microsoft? What are you starting to think about?
Well, so we technically can't talk to Microsoft outside of what they knew during diligence about what we're doing. So luckily, they saw all our roadmap for the next couple of years. They saw what we're building. Most of what they would like us to do is continue to push that fast.
Okay.
And luckily, it aligned, and I think we'll continue to do that. Nat and Satya said it in the press with Chris when the deal was announced, which was open platform, open ecosystem. Without getting into specifics and roadmap, that is the strategy. That is the play. We want GitHub to be the developer home. We want it to be the developer platform, the developer lifecycle. Not that we want to own those things. We just want to make developers as productive as possible, and we want to find a way to do that out in the open. In a kind of a strange sort of way too, we think that we can actually bring some semblance of sanity to the cloud, which right now is a little bit of a fractured, insane landscape.
Mm-hmm. Even at Microsoft?
Even at Microsoft,
Azure.
I'll be open to say I think that all the clouds have grown up very fast, and I think that I've used all three. I continue to use all three. If I'm playing with infrastructure, I am playing with all three. And there is much to like about every single cloud. And if there's an executive inside any organization that says our cloud is great and it has no warts, they should be shunned out of the building because all three of them have major downsides.
That's what all three of them tell me.
Well, that's good.
They'll get shunned out of the building.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. Is there anything you can tell us about what we should expect in the near future from you guys?
So we have our Universe conference in October 16th and 17th. If you've been watching any of the press releases, you kind of already probably see where we're going with this. But we don't want to spoil the surprise because I'm sure PR will be watching this and they'll get very angry with me. But for the most part, you just keep watching. Open platform, open ecosystem is the theme. The announcements like Google will become more frenzied and frantic over the next couple of months. We'll see more of those, and couldn't be more excited about getting some of those things live out there.
All right, we'll keep watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frederic.
Right on time. Thank you.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.
Microsoft #1 take. you want to post hoc rationalize everything, we can always sound incredibly intelligent. But I also imagine that I've only been there for a year, but given that I've been around, the idea was so true that the developers gravitated to it. They really wanted it. And then there's a flywheel effect on one side, and don't mess it up over here on another side, and then just kind of watch what happens. But
the developers are a fickle bunch. They're not easy. They don't like to pay for stuff. No, but how do you Thank you.
thanks everybody.